Thanks, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak here. This is my only slide, and I would like to, I guess I'm taking a bit of a change in course. I'll be talking a bit more about the big data portion of today's theme. And what I'd really like to get across is what some of these efforts in big data can tell us and maybe surprise us about what we think about the way that infectious diseases spread. So I study pandemic influenza and the way that it spreads through populations. It's a very interesting disease to study from a mathematical standpoint, but as anyone who's ever taught maths knows, the question we often get is when will we ever use this in real life? So I would like to tell you maybe a few practical bits of information that I've learned from my research, how to outrun a pandemic in 3 steps. When you ask someone to chart out the course of an infectious disease, of a pandemic, you often get something that follows essentially the plot of the film Contagion, if you've seen it. Someone gets an obscure disease, they fly to a large city like New York or London, and within days everyone is infected. But I'd like to draw your attention to the figure at the top of the slide here. This is what actually happened in the United States for the 2009 H1N1 pandemic. The warmer colors here correspond to an earlier onset date. So what we see is an onset of the epidemic here, somewhere in the deep south, and it spreads outward like a water ripple. There's nothing really particularly special about this region. There's not a lot of people who live there. It's very rural, especially they grow a lot of plants. The cities like New York and Chicago up north are among the last to get infected. That's strange. The second bit that I'd like to direct your attention to is this scale on the right-hand side. You'll note that it goes from August to November, so that's 13 weeks, which is how long it took the flu to spread from where it started up into the northeast. That means that it was spreading about 22 kilometers per day, or less than 1 kilometer per hour. That's slow enough for even me to outrun. So you can outrun a pandemic, but where should you run? And when should you start? So these are a couple of the questions I'm trying to answer. First, go north. It turns out that if you would have done this in 2009, you would have stayed well ahead of the epidemic wave. Well, then you may ask, would you be better off just moving north and staying there? Not necessarily, but it seems that in a general influenza season, that may give you extra notice before you get the flu. Disproportionately, we've seen from this data set that influenza outbreaks start in the United States, in these southern states, far more than you would expect. We're still trying to trace why that is. It could have anything to do with meteorology, humidity, it could be social norms or the ways that children interact in these settings. We're not sure. But it seems that if you're in the north, you'll at least have better warning before the flu reaches you. Second, be vigilant, especially when you're on spring break. I'd like to see this last sign implemented in the beaches that people go to between between April and May for a vacation. You can't see it on this slide, but the 2009 pandemic was foreshadowed by an earlier spring wave of the epidemic. I just hit a few locations, but it turns out that a similar wave was seen before the devastating 1918 pandemic, and we also saw something similar before the 2003 epidemic, all of which were some of the most severe epidemics that we've seen. So if you see an epidemic starting at the wrong time of year, you know that that fall you may be in store for something much larger. Finally, this may not be what you expect. Yes, you should always cover your sneezes and your coughs, but what I'm trying to get at here is that you'll have better chances if you're not a child. As you all, I'm sure, know, children spread the flu, they get the flu, but there's actually not a lot of data about this. But we've found 2 bits. One of them is that schools tend to increase the transmission rate of influenza by double. That's the result of some of our modeling in the early stages of the outbreak. And second, if you remake this plot separated out by age bands, you turn out to get a leading edge from children. The adults lag behind. So flu is detectable in children first, and which is, in a sense, what you would expect. But that gives us a sense for surveillance efforts. Maybe we should be focusing on kids. For data collection efforts, maybe we should be focusing on the way that they interact, the way that they spread flu from place to place, in order to get a better sense for the way that flu spreads. So that's really all I've got. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'd be happy to take a question as well.
Quick question. Sure, disappear. I lived in Chicago for a while, and I'm just looking at your map, sir. The incident up in November, is that due to a lot of traveling about Thanksgiving?
It could be, partly. What we notice in the data set is that you actually get a sharp dip in recorded cases right around Thanksgiving because everybody's home and they don't want to go into the doctor, and then it increases the week after. So you see that in the data set. It could be. That's something we have to look at. But it is just sort of in the phase of the wave as well. So it's hard to say.
And then the other follow-on to that is, I guess a fair number of people move from north to south as you get towards holiday time.
That's true.
Do you get reinfections back down in Florida?
Back down in Florida?
As people move from New York, Chicago, etc., for this winter vacation?
We haven't seen that actually in our seasonal flu, but that may be something we ought to look at. The signal may be there. It might not be present necessarily in the epidemic onsets, but maybe in severity or maybe some subtle shifts in the local areas. So yeah, that's something we'll definitely look at. Thank you.
We have to give our keynote speaker the chance for yes.
Well, I'm just sort of interested that you haven't sort of stuck the rest of South America on there.
Yeah.
And, I just, and all the rest of it. So I just wondered, you said go north, but presumably this epidemic came from the south, which was Mexico. So is the northern trajectory a generalised phenomenon?
It seems to be for general flu season. Like for example, as you mentioned, the 2009 epidemic started in Mexico. But we're not actually sure where the first United States case came from. It could easily, we actually think that it probably went from Mexico, amplified a bit in Asia, and may have come back from there. And so it's, and actually the place where it started right here is on the Gulf. It's not actually bordering Mexico. So that's something we have to look at for sure. But definitely in seasonal epidemics, even when we don't have necessarily an epicenter in Mexico, we do tend to see the sort of northward spread. And we're trying to sort out why that is.
Yeah, well, just no questions as a comment. Yeah.
Great.
So this is this pandemic that I was chief medical officer in Wales, and so I'm finding it slightly difficult to relate geographically, because here people came back from Mexico on holidays to Glasgow, to the north, and it took a while to come down to Birmingham and London, and it took actually quite a long time to come to Wales. So your south-north thing, I'm having problems in terms of the virus behavior, because actually the spread, as Anne said, from Mexico, seems to relate to holidaymakers returning to the country, and therefore the spread happening through internal travel.
Absolutely.
Into large urban areas,
Right.
Which is Birmingham and London.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. In the interest of time, maybe you can have to
Yeah, we can.
follow up over the break.
Yeah.
So thanks again.
Thank you.